Putin is scared. Or I would even better say he's in total shock, because Moscow city center was attacked. Ukrainians confirmed total destruction of Crimean bridge to force Russians to negotiate. And to make things even worse, up to 100,000 Russian soldiers are pushed further away from the eastern front lines. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's get straight to the point and talk about some ridiculous Russian propaganda. So, we have this guy, Nikolai Patrushev, who is the secretary of the Security Council of Russia. And he basically said, and yeah, he is one of the closest Putin's inner circle member. So long story short, recently he mentioned that those Ukrainian authorities, as soon as there's even minor injury to the Ukrainian soldier, they immediately take this guy and sell him for body parts. I mean, yes, he literally said this. It is getting even more and more ridiculous every single day, the things that they can come up with. But he said, like, less offensive, I would say. He mentioned this as involuntarily organ donation. And I mean, just think about how ridiculous this statement is to even say out loud. Ukrainians are protecting their own land. Every single person counts. There is the biggest unity among Ukrainian people probably in forever. And, like, just sacrificing people like this, even with the minor injuries, like, I'm completely, I don't even know where these things come from, literally. I'm not gonna even continue speaking about this, because how stupid is this? So I just ask you for you to leave your thoughts down below in the comments. But at least do not worry, as long as you are within our Russian Dude community, your body parts are safe. Oh, and by the way, yes, I do have a small announcement to make, because me and my wife, we celebrated our anniversary this past weekend. So if you can just celebrate with us, and just please like this video and subscribe to my channel, please. This will be absolutely amazing gift from you guys. We did so many cool things, such as, for example, flying in helicopter over Niagara Falls, and I will post these photos and videos to my Instagram if you want to see them. The link is down below, so feel free to subscribe to my Instagram as well. But okay, now let's get back to Russian-Ukrainian news, because recently the capital of Russia, Moscow city center, has been under attack. There has also been a case of friendly fire in another Russian city, and approximately around 100,000 Russian soldiers are being pushed further away from the eastern front lines. We will talk about all this right now, and then we'll switch to the south of Ukraine, where Ukrainians also disrupted completely the logistics of Russians. They practically took the Crimean peninsula under fire control, and speaking about Crimea, they confirmed the total destruction of Crimean bridge in the near future. And so yes, speaking about the attacks against Moscow, this past weekend several drones were intercepted using anti-drone guns, which basically make fully loaded with all the cargo drones to just fall and detonate in residential areas. And this is exactly what happened in Moscow city center. I mean, every single time a residential area in Ukraine is destroyed, Russians immediately blame Ukrainian air defense system. They say that you should not intercept our missiles over these houses. And then at the same time, they literally intercept drones, fully loaded drones, with raiders right in Moscow city center. So who is the stupid one? But that's not the only case, because yet another drone has been intercepted in Taganrog, a city which is extremely close to the border with Ukraine. But later on, it was established that in fact this was a reconnaissance drone of Russians. So it was pretty much a case of friendly fire. Russians blamed Ukrainians at first, and then when it was clear that they intercepted their own drone, they went silent. But unfortunately, the Russian forces could not resist attacking residential areas in Ukraine, such as, for example, recently an S-300 missile has been intercepted above Kharkiv, and the debris caused a lot of damage on the ground. And to sum it all up, there are also some very loud noises in temporarily occupied Donetsk, as you can see from this video. Right, and now let's go to the actual east of Ukraine and talk about approximately 100,000 Russian soldiers being pushed further away from the eastern front lines, and then we'll switch our attention to the south of Ukraine when the situation for Russians is also pretty devastating. But first of all, we just have to make a stop in Belarus next to Ukrainian border, where recently Wagner soldiers resumed once again their trainings with Belarusian soldiers right next to Ukrainian borders. And in response to that, Poland started bringing a lot of its soldiers and military vehicles right next to the borders with Belarus as well, as you can see from this video. And speaking about Poland, recently 2 Ukrainian Leopard 2 tanks, which have been severely damaged in the battle, have been delivered to this country for some repairs, which just once again confirms the fact that Ukrainians prefer to save as many military equipment and vehicles as possible instead of just abandoning them on the battlefields. Yes, abandonment happens from both sides, Ukrainians and Russians, which, to be honest, Russians do way more often. And so, as we finally move to the east of Ukraine, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Russians attempted to do some offensive activities along Kupiansk, Svatove, Crimean front line, but they were absolutely meaningless, pointless, they were not able to achieve anything, and pretty much the pace of their offensive in the east already slowed down significantly. And at the same time, Ukrainians were able to destroy a large ammunition warehouse of Russians using the artillery to the north of Svatove. At the same time, if you remember from my last several episodes, Russians were actively trying to advance in the east of Ukraine, as you can see from this number of red arrows from this map. But Ukrainians were able to respond and bring the reinforcements pretty quickly, and that is why they stopped completely the advancement of Russians, and now the situation is under control. And to make things even worse for Russians, Ukrainians in fact were able to liberate 2 small settlements in these directions, called Nadia and Nova Yegorivka. And this is already confirmed by this map, as you can see right here. Yes, Russians indeed were advancing somewhere before July 27th, then Ukrainians were able to stop these advancements, and then the next day they were able to recapture these above-mentioned settlements, as you can see from this map. But most importantly, according to some Western and Ukrainian intelligence, Russians concentrated approximately 100,000 soldiers and approximately 900 tanks along these eastern front lines, which once again Ukrainians were able to completely stop this another wave of invasion in less than a couple of weeks, which pretty much shows you the complete unpreparedness of the Russian conventional soldiers. And besides that, according to Andriy Chernyak, the representative of Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, Russians are actively mobilizing those Ukrainians living on temporarily occupied territories, such as for example Luhansk and Donetsk in our case. So I mean, can you imagine this? Russians came to your country, took your land and said that now you are Russians, so now we're gonna mobilize you as Russians and force you to fight against your very own Ukrainian comrades. This is not a liberation in my head. But nevertheless, Ukrainians do not stop advancing, such as for example, according to Anna Malyar, in the last week alone, Ukrainians were able to liberate a total of 12.6 square kilometers, and since the beginning of this counter-offensive, the biggest land has been reportedly liberated around Bakhmut, totaling of approximately 37 square kilometers. And while doing this, Ukrainians continue to effectively destroy Russian military equipment, such as for example, reportedly, an artillery firing position has been successfully destroyed to the north of Zaitsev, and then, as you can see from this video, an air defense system Buk M and also an electronic warfare system of Russians have been successfully also destroyed by Ukrainians. And just overall, a total of 7 concentration of Russian forces, 8 artillery units, 2 pieces of electronic warfare equipment and 2 ammunition depots of Russians have been destroyed in the last 24 hours alone. And so yes, now as promised, let's quickly talk about the situation in the south of Ukraine. Ukrainians totally destroying a major logistics between Crimea and Kherson region, also taking full fire control over the northern parts of the peninsula, and finally confirming the plans for total destruction of Crimean bridge, hopefully in the near future. But first of all, we have to make a stop in Kryvyi Rog, where recently, unfortunately, there has been yet another direct attack of Russians against a civilian infrastructure, in this case literally a residential building, as you can see from this video. And I mean, previously, whenever Ukraine was attacking Moscow, doing some minor damages, Russians already acknowledged this as international terroristic act. And then you see this thing, literally obliteration of a residential building in Kryvyi Rog, far away from the front lines. And Russians said that they were able to successfully destroy a critical military infrastructure of Ukrainians. Let me know in the comments, I guess, if you want to. Does it make sense to you? But fortunately, we do have some good news. You probably already forgot about this Kinburn Spit, which is located right across from Mykolaiv region, which Russians, as you can see, still temporarily occupy. And so Ukrainians recently reported that they destroyed a large firing position of Russians along with their observation post located on this Kinburn Spit. At the same time, if you remember from the previous week, one of the major liberations that Ukrainians were able to achieve is to recapture from here Staromayorsk. Well, Russians started to push the propaganda that immediately the next day Russian forces came back to this settlement and captured it back. But as you can see from this map, it is obviously not even close to be confirmed. And then we even have this video of a Ukrainian soldier right from inside of Staromayorsk, and he's saying that no, the city is fully ours, there are no Russians. And in addition to that, Ukrainians continue to do their counteroffensive activities along the Zaporozhye front lines. They do not stop, they still try to advance and liberate as much territory as possible. We even have this video of one of these counteroffensive raids from Zaporozhye front lines, and you can see that Ukrainians are predominantly successful. The full video, due to YouTube guidelines, will not be allowed to show right here, and if you want to see the full version, it is on my Patreon. The link is down below. There is 1 week of free access. And another major thing that happened recently is that Ukrainians once again attacked the bridge located in Chonhar, which connects Crimean Peninsula and Kherson region, and right here we have allegedly a picture from this bridge. As you can see, it is totally unusable. This attack has been performed by Ukrainians, allegedly using a Storm Shadow long-range missiles, and as you can see from this map, this is the exact location of this bridge, and you can see the importance of its location, because now, since it is not being able to be used by Russians, they have to make a very long detour and get even closer to Ukrainian front lines and to Ukrainian artillery systems. But another extremely important thing is just once again the distance of this bridge from the front lines. As you can see, Ukrainians can already reach it with their long-range missiles, meaning that the entire northern part of Crimean Peninsula, this bottleneck between the peninsula and Kherson region, is now under fire control by Ukrainians, and they can perform successful attacks every single time they want it. And yes, speaking about Crimea and bridges, I think you already know where I'm trying to go. So, recently we received this video where the local authorities, they claim that Russians continue to repair Crimean bridge, which has been previously attacked, and most likely it will not be finished as they previously promised. Somewhere this fall, most likely the repairs will continue all the way until the end of December this year. In addition to that, they installed these steel bars around the bridge to prevent Ukrainian drones from entering the area and targeting the bridge once again. I honestly do not think this will help to prevent Ukrainian drones passing through. After all, they can just use some other long-range missiles, but this is what Russians did. And then, according to the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Oleksiy Reznikov, let Russians repair this bridge, because we will not stop attacking it. We will not stop until this bridge is totally destroyed, which is pretty much the direct confirmation of Ukrainian authorities that it is their major plan this or next year to fully obliterate the connection between Crimea and the territory of Russia. It has also been mentioned by some Western media that currently approximately 2,000 Ukrainian soldiers are being trained by elite British soldiers and paratroopers, and most likely this is the group of people which will return to Crimea, either as a paratroopers airborne or maybe even diversion groups, and their main responsibility will be to create the instability on the peninsula and to help Ukrainians recapture it as soon as possible. Because after all, as it has already been previously mentioned several times, one of the main goals of Ukraine at this stage of war is to get as close as possible to Crimean Peninsula and to force Russia and specifically Putin to talk. It does not mean that Ukraine surrendered its plans to recapture Crimea. No, it is only once again to force Putin to talk, and then most likely Ukrainians will just keep going and keep liberating territories, including Crimea. And as of right now, as previously mentioned, the Russian offensive completely exhausted itself. Russians tried to attack for more than 1 week, and now they're again switching to defense mode, while Ukrainians, they pretty much never stop pushing, and now they will only double down their counteroffensive measures. So, some Western analytics, including Ukrainian ones, they see these 3 potential scenarios to develop in the near future. First of all, Ukrainians might recapture a big territory around Bakhmut, which will help them to start marching to Donetsk in the future. This is the first potential direction. The second potential direction of their counteroffensive is to liberate Vuhledar and then start marching towards Mariupol, located right here. But the most probable direction, which is pretty much almost everyone expects Ukraine to do exactly this, is to increase the counteroffensive pressure along the Zaporozhye front lines, then start going towards Tokmak with the ultimate goal to go towards Melitopol and get as close as possible towards Crimean area, which once again to establish the fire control over the northern parts of Crimea, and yes, once again, as confirmed by President Zelensky, to do everything possible to force Putin to talk. And even if this will still not be enough to push the actual soldiers away from Crimea, Ukrainians will most certainly make their life on this peninsula extremely complicated. I mean, imagine, you do not have a Crimean bridge to evacuate to Russia. You cannot go to Melitopol or to Zaporozhye through northern Crimean roads because all of them are under Ukrainian fire control. So what you have to do is just to remain on Crimean Peninsula waiting to be either saved or to be pushed completely by Ukrainians. Not much to do, nowhere much to go, right? And as a result of all this, without a doubt, the biggest turning point in this war will be whenever Ukrainians will march as close as possible to Crimea, the pretty much golden ticket for Putin. And without a doubt, the biggest table turning point in this war will be whenever Ukrainians advance extremely close to Crimea, to Putin's beloved Crimea, the peninsula that he will do everything possible to save it, including potentially acknowledging the defeat in this war. He will obviously not say we lost to Russian regular people, he will find a way to explain the loss of territories, but it will be potentially the end of this war, this event. And if you don't want to miss it, just please consider subscribing to my channel. It only takes 1 click. The absolutely best way to support my work will be through my Patreon. You can also become my channel member and unlock some channel perks, or simply use a PayPal link. Everything can be found to the right and down below. Thank you so much for attention, товарищи. Please follow me on Instagram. Beware, there are scammers in the comments, and see you tomorrow.